And I saw you and I was like, wait, hold up.
Email or
everything down. This is a cool kid.
Oh yeah. Like when you see like Diana, Tab, and Emily together, like they all.
Yeah.
Like Diana's different. Like when I met her, she had like this short hair. And now she's like different.
Josh right there. Hey, Josh. What?
All right.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here to attend our seminar. Today's guest is Mr. Andy Mason. He is the social economics at World Bank, and he willing to be here on Saturday morning and to share his experience in working in a World Bank and also sharing some personal perspective about his profession. So welcome, Andy, and I would like to leave the stage to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure to be here. As Nguyen said, my name is Andy Mason. I work at the World Bank in Washington, D.C. I manage programs in social protection and labor in the part of the bank that focuses on Eastern Europe and Central Asia. So these are countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union or the Eastern Bloc countries. But I've worked in many different regions of the World Bank. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a bit. It's my pleasure to be here today. It is Saturday morning. It's a beautiful day outside, but there's no other place I would rather be right now than right here. So you know that I'm doing this because I'm very happy to do it and to meet you and to get to know you over the next hour or so. I want to tell a story a bit about my own journey in my career and hopefully give you some insights or at least raise some food for thought for you about your own path forward. I'll tell you the punchline now, which is that that some people take a path from here to there and it looks kind of like this. Other people take a path that looks a little bit like spaghetti. That's me. And somehow it all kind of worked out at the end. So, well, it's not the end yet. but so far so good. So, but before I get started and tell you my own story, maybe what I can do is get to know all of you a little bit. So we'll have time for question and answer at the end, and you can tell me sort of specific things about yourself or ask specific questions. But just to get a sense, how many of you are here? How many of you here are in high school right now? And of the high school students, how many of you are seniors, juniors, younger? Okay, so sophomore, freshman, sophomore. Okay, all good. All good. So I have two boys. Oh, I should, before I go any further, I should introduce, this is my wife, Doris. My original Vietnamese connection. And we have two boys, and one of them is 17. He's not here today, but he's maybe even still be sleeping for all I know. He's a senior at Walt Whitman High School in Bethesda, Maryland. And we have a almost 21-year-old boy who's at UC Berkeley. So, okay, great. How many, so those are the high schoolers among you. How many college students? Okay, great. And anybody who's already passed college and out either in graduate school or the professional world? I'll include myself there. Okay, very good. How many of you are not Vietnamese? Don't worry, my hand's up as well. Okay, if you don't mind my asking, where are you from?
I'm China.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Connecticut.
I've heard of that. Okay, very good. Let's see, anything else that I can think of to ask at the moment? Okay, I think that'll get us started, and as I go along, I'll ask you some questions.
Excuse me, do you have some pre-high school kids?
Really? Oops. And where are the pre-high schools? No way. Well, you're all welcome. So look, I like to do this very informally, and if I start saying things that don't make any sense for one reason or another, stop me, and I'll, if you need some more explanation, don't feel shy. Then, just let me know, and I'll explain whatever it is that I'm talking about. So, let me maybe start by saying a little bit about myself, my professional self. So, as I said, I work at the World Bank. I've worked at the World Bank for nearly 20 years. I now manage programs which are basically what in the U.S. we would call social welfare programs. They have to do with programs that target poor people, provide support to the poor, either sometimes in the form of financial support, sometimes in the form of training for the job market, and then social security. So, and mostly related to old age income security, pensions, those sorts of things. But I've had many different careers, even in my life in the World Bank, and I've worked in different regions. I've worked in the East Asia region of the World Bank, which includes Vietnam. In fact, toward the end of my talk, I'll show you some of the work that I did when I worked in East Asia. I hope will be of some interest. I've worked in Latin America, Africa, South Asia. I'm an economist by training. And I will say a little bit more about that in a moment. I also, from time to time, teach a course in public policy at Georgetown. So some of what I'll talk about when I show you my World Bank work later is also some of the content of what I do when I teach my course. Yeah. So let's just start with the World Bank and make sure that you all, when I say all these things about the World Bank, that you know what I'm talking about. Who here has heard of the World Bank? Okay. Of the people who have heard of the World Bank, who thinks you know what it does? Okay. Does anyone want to say what they think it does? There's a lot. I should tell you that there's a lot of confusion out in the world about the World Bank. We're not a commercial bank. We don't have tellers. We don't have ATMs. You can't apply there for a loan.
Can you keep track of the world currency?
Well, we are very engaged in the global economy. That's absolutely correct. Currency would be a part of it, but there's a lot of things that we do. Anybody else?
Of the economy of impoverished countries.
Yeah, that's I think really at the core of what we do. So our mandate is to help reduce poverty and to promote what we call shared prosperity. So raise the well-being in countries in development. So countries traditionally that have been low-income, middle-income countries. And we don't lend to individuals. We don't have individual bank accounts. We lend to the governments of the country for development projects of various sorts, and I'll come back to that. Actually, lending is probably the main thing that we do for projects, but we also do economic and social policy analysis, and then we engage in dialogue with policymakers to help improve the policies, to help either the countries grow faster, to better educate their population, and to reduce poverty. So that's the essence of what we do, and we have a lot of people with different sorts of training, many economists like myself, but other sorts of backgrounds, who work with people in governments to put together projects, and then we lend for the implementation of those projects. Yeah, so that's in essence what we do. I mentioned I'm an economist by training. There are different types of economists. So you may know, if you pay attention to the U.S. news, that often the Federal Reserve is in the news, and economists worry about things like interest rates and the government deficit and government debt and inflation, things like that. So economists do a lot of those sorts of things, and we have a lot of economists at the World Bank who worry about these issues in developing countries. And then there are economists that focus on the behavior and the outcomes, for better or worse, of firms or of households or of individuals. And that's the kind of work that I do. When I focus on social welfare, I focus a lot on the family or the household as a unit, or individuals working in the labor market. So there's a whole range of types of economists. Is anybody here in high school, college, or pre-high school who's studying economics? Okay. So if I talk about any economic terms that you're not sure of, just raise your hand, stop me, and I'll be happy to explain. One thing I think that makes economists, certainly World Bank economists, different from other types of people in their professional lives is that we care a lot about data. Probably if you pay attention to the news in the U.S. and especially in the D.C. area, there's a lot about politics, and there are big policy debates, and they're often informed by people's ideological views and not so much by evidence or by data. And actually, a very important piece of what we do at the World Bank is to try to ground our policy work and our lending in data. So, and I'll come back to that a bit when I show you this bit of work that I did earlier on. Okay, so that's the World Bank part of the background. Now, I said I'm an economist, but I wasn't always an economist. When I was your age, what was I doing? I know Nguyen knows that.
That's cool. That's cool.
I was at school. I was absolutely at school. I was, so let's start at high school. When I was in high school, I didn't think at all about economics. I was going to be an actor. And all my friends were in theater, except for the ones who were in music or dance. And I told my parents that, I loved it. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it. And my parents weren't very happy about it because they thought that, and they're correct, that, acting is a very hard profession to get into. So they pictured me, I'm from the New York area originally, so they pictured me waiting at tables somewhere in New York City or driving a yellow taxi cab. That was a source of some debate while I was growing up. But I went off to college, and I studied theater, among other things. And I actually, my undergraduate degree is a degree in theater arts, not in economics. And so this is the beginning of the spaghetti path onto becoming an economist. And then what happened? Well, I think I was about a junior in college, and I learned about something called the Hunger Project. And the Hunger Project is a non-governmental agency that's committed to ending hunger in the world. And so some of my friends and I got involved in raising money for this, and my parents got involved, actually, and some of my friends' parents. And separately, although I didn't know her at the time, Doris was doing work with the Hunger Project in California. And I got very much inspired about making a difference. And I started to think, maybe this is something, if I work on ending hunger in the world, maybe I won't end up a taxi driver. So I started to think more about this. And I mean, I was a junior already in college, and I already had declared my major. And if I was going to change my major at that point, I would have had to stay extra years, and I thought that's not going to work very well. So I finished my theater major, but then, based on the work that I had done for the Hunger Project and my new interest, I found through one of my professors at school an opportunity to go overseas. And I went to a place called Sri Lanka. Can anybody picture where Sri Lanka is on the map?
Southern tip of India.
That's right. It's a little teeny teardrop-shaped island at the very southern part of India, in the Indian Ocean. In those days, it was a very poor country. Now it's a middle-income country. And I worked for an NGO there that was doing development in poor rural areas. It was really, especially coming.
NGO.
NGO means non-governmental organization. So it's like basically not exactly a charitable organization, but a voluntary organization. People went there out of their commitment to do something rather than out of making a lot of money. So that was a very eye-opening experience, because I came from the U.S. I came from New York, affluent sort of area, and here I was throwing myself actually into a situation with some of the poorest people you could ever find, but doing something to try to help them. And this was really thrilling for me, and really got me very. I mean, it was eye-opening, but it made me want to do more of this. So I spent about almost 2 years doing that, helping to run projects, sometimes standing in rice fields with my Sri Lankan friends, trying to figure out, what does the white guy know about paddy farming? But anyway, that's doing that. So it was a very interesting experience, and I think the important point here is it was very inspirational for me. It gave me the entry point for a new path in my life. Yes?
How do you communicate in India?
So, yeah, that's a great question. So, well, it turns out that a lot of people there speak at least a little bit of English. So I was able to speak partially through English. But I actually spent some time learning the local language. And so, and actually, I'll tell you a little secret. When I was in high school, and even in college, I studied Spanish. And I didn't do too badly, in terms of grades, but I couldn't speak Spanish worth anything. But because it was book learning, and I don't know if you have a sense that book learning and life learning can be quite different, right? So, but I learned how to speak Sinhalese, that's the local language, pretty quickly. And it was fun. I mean, I was talking to people, I'd get on the bus and they'd say, "Oh, you're the white guy who speaks Sinhalese." And I went, "Yeah, that's me." So it was interesting and fun. And I learned a lot. And it really turned the whole direction of my life and career into a sort of a different path. And so then I decided I wanted to study public policy. So I went and I did a master's degree in public policy. There are lots of schools that teach that. I'm teaching sometimes now at Georgetown, but American University, George Mason, UMD, I'm sure they all have public policy programs. And then I went, and I still wanted to work in developing countries, so I went and I lived and worked in Indonesia for a couple of years. And that was a little bit different. I wasn't knee deep in rice fields at that time. I was working in the Ministry of Finance and giving advice to the finance ministry. Very interesting. And in Indonesia at the time, they were really trying to do things to make the economy grow, to reduce poverty, and so that was also a very exciting period. It was also a period where I was told that having a master's degree probably wasn't enough for what I needed to do. I actually never really had thought about that before, but so after a couple of years of working there, I decided to go back and do a Ph.D. in economics. Now, the last thing that I want you to go away from here today is thinking that you need to go out and get a Ph.D. That's not my recommendation at all. Some of you may do that, and some of that may be perfect for you. But when you find your own path, you'll know what you need to do. And that was and that I think is the message that when I saw what I wanted to do, and then I saw what I needed to do to get there, and then I went and did it. Yeah, and so then I studied economics, and then as I was finishing my degree, I applied for the World Bank, and it just kind of worked out. And here I am 20 years later, having a very rich career working in a number of different areas in the World Bank. And here, by the way, I should say, even within my World Bank career, I've done many different things. I've worked on poverty reduction. I've worked on labor. I've worked on promoting gender equality. Gender equality meaning equality between men and women in society, girls and boys. Actually, that's what I'm going to talk to you about in a little bit.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So when you go to Sri Lanka, that's when you change your direction from being an actor to being a public policy major. So you say you were taking the master degree for public policy, but I think in order to take the master, you have to have some credits in economics. But before you were taking theater, so how can you deal with that?
That's a very good question. So, well, it may have changed a little bit from when I went to school, which was a long time ago. But what you study matters, and your experience matters. And so when I saw that I was moving in a different direction, and I arranged to go overseas, then all of a sudden I took some courses, but I didn't major in economics or in international development. I still majored in theater, but I took some economics, politics, and sociology classes that at least gave me an introduction to some of the things. And then I had 2 years of life experience actually doing the thing. And I think, to be honest with you, that was probably the most important thing to my getting into the public policy program.
What about your years at the nonprofit for several years before you went to get your master's, right?
Oh yes, I
forgot that
skipped
part.
that. Well, actually, that's where I met.
Where were you?
Good call,
That's right. I didn't skip it because, but I was trying to make the spaghetti string a little bit shorter. But no, that's true. So I went to Sri Lanka, and then I came back, and then I worked for a nonprofit organization based in California. My desk was next to Doris's, and the rest is history. And so I got some more experience in, roughly speaking, in my field. And so I had been a good student, even though I was studying something else. So my grades were okay. I had 3 or 4 years of experience in my field, and together those things made a difference. I should say this is not unique. I had a young person who was working for me for a couple of years, who did her undergraduate work in labor and industrial relations. She worked, in fact, on this report that I'll tell you about, for a couple of years at the World Bank, and then she decided she wanted to be a doctor. Even though she was going into social sciences, and then she took a U-turn and went in another direction. And so she's just finished a year of all kinds of hard science training in a pre-med program that's designed for people who have done something and then want to make the transition into biology or medicine. And I think actually this is one of the big messages that I'd like to convey to all of you today, is that if you see where you want to go, there's always a way to get there. So you may, whatever stage you're at the moment, you may have a certain idea of what you want to do, and actually you may always want to do that. And so I don't necessarily recommend the spaghetti string path to doing what you want to do or making your difference in it. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that back and forth or round and round, to find out what it is that you want to do, what you can get excited about, and what you love. And I think actually that's my second message, and maybe and as important I think as the first. When you're thinking about a career, obviously we all, at some point think about money, and money is good, right? You need it for all kinds of things, but you also have to wake up in the morning and spend 8, 10, 12 hours a day doing something. So it's really helpful if you're doing something that when you get up in the morning you get excited about, that you're enthusiastic about, that you want to jump out of bed and get to it because it's really something that gets you going. Actually, I think the people who are most successful and most satisfied, and actually, frankly, also make the most money in their career, are people who find this perfect intersection between what they love and what they're good at. And figuring out what you're good at is one process, and figuring out what you love is another process. And if you can find that intersection between what you love and what you're good at, you've got it made. Because then, it's like, okay, next day I'm ready to go. And, and you'll be financially rewarded for it as well, I'm pretty sure. So, but yeah, I don't think, a lot of people think that the straight path is the right path. And actually, this is my simple diagram, which is why I wanted the whiteboard, which is that, so in mathematics, for those of you who have taken math, you know that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, right? So, is this the right way towards your career? I've kind of said the answer from my own sense, but what do you think? Is this from your perspective, is this the way forward? Okay. Yes.
Actually, if you're looking at a globe, the straight path might not always be the fastest. Sometimes it's the other way, around the top.
Right. I like that. That's different than what I'm about to tell you, but it's the same idea. So in math, this is the shortest distance between 2 points. But do any of you either sail or know anything about sailing? So in sailing, is a straight line usually the shortest distance, right? If you're starting, you'll probably have to correct me if I make a mistake here, but in sailing, you may have your eye on your prize, but the wind may have a different idea. And so often the fastest way to get to there will be to do this. And then there are some of us who get there like this. But, you eventually get there. A couple other things that for me are sort of important lessons when you're thinking about your career. So the first one is do what you love and find what you're good at. And if you can get that mix, that's perfect. Second is, there are many ways to get to where you want to get to. And this one if this works for you, fantastic. I have nothing against it, but it's not the only way to get there. The third thing has to do with what some of my colleagues at the World Bank are calling mindset and grit, or perseverance. So there's some very, very interesting research that my friends are doing at the World Bank, and there are other people who are doing it outside, trying to understand how people become successful. And it helps to be smart. There's no doubt about that. But people have different capacities. But actually, as important or more important than how smart you are is whether you have something that they call a growth mindset, meaning that you believe through perseverance that you can actually change your basic capacities, that your basic capacities are not fixed or limited, and grit, this idea of perseverance, that you see the prize there and you're going to do what you need to do to get there. So, so actually, yeah.
Just wondering, can this be taught to people, or is it something that's innate?
That's a great question. Actually, so there's a lot of research looking exactly at this question now, because, and for a long time it was taken as something that might be innate, or might be instilled in one's family situation. So I know a lot of, stereotypically, East Asians, and Vietnamese among them, have this sort of work ethic, right? If we're going to indulge in cultural stereotypes of the positive kind, then then Vietnamese, for example, East Asians more generally are thought to have a lot of hard work ethic and grit, let's say. But they're actually finding that traditionally in labor programs, and this is part of the area where I work at the World Bank, that we used to try to train people in hard skills like math or accounting or economics or business or something like that, and that's all important. But that you can actually, there's an area called soft skills, and that soft skills are as important or more important than hard skills for being successful in one's work. Now, the way you teach it is different. It's not conveying information the way that traditional learning is. Some of it is through exercises and group activities and experiential learning. So the mode of teaching and learning can be quite different, but it can in fact be taught. And in fact, one of the things that my friends, some of them are doing now, is using data from these training programs and then workplace outcomes to determine how much of an impact the teaching of this growth mindset and of perseverance can create. But the results so far show that that for people who, that people who have a growth mindset, people who have grit, can make up and more than make up for any deficit that they have in, say, natural talent, whether it be in sports or in music or in acting or something like that. So it can make a big difference in one's success. And in fact, now people who work with kids in schools and learning environments are saying, parents, you shouldn't say, wow, that's great, you've done this homework so quickly, you're really smart. You really should be focusing on, wow, you figured out a really hard problem by working hard on this, and that really being the key to success. So that would be the third thing. It's easy for me to say it. I'm not necessarily going to convey, I'm not going to bestow upon you in an hour's time perseverance, but this is a quality that once you've seen where you want to go, finding different paths, if it doesn't look like this, you can still get there. And then related to perseverance and grit, the last lesson I want to say before I turn back to the World Bank work has to do with a principle maybe some of you have heard called 10,000 hours. So for those of you who are I will explain it in a moment. But I saw some people shaking their heads yes. So any of you want to explain what that is?
That's the amount of time it takes to master a skill.
That's right. So there's anybody else want to add to that? No, that pretty well captures it. So there's an author called Malcolm Gladwell, and he studied what some of the keys to being not just successful, but being the master of something. And he looked at people who were virtuoso violinists. He looked at people who were sports figures, masters of business, CEOs of companies. And, talent never hurts. I don't want to give that message. But what he found is that people who are masters in their area of life and work got there through doing what they do a lot. And 10,000 hours seemed to be the threshold, to the best that he could measure it, between people who were sort of novices or good at something and people who were really masters in what they do. So I think that would be my last message. So do what you love. Find the intersection between what you love and what you're good at. There's no correct path to getting to where you go. Perseverance, grit, and then once you know where you want to go and what you want to do it. And eventually, even if you aren't quite a master yet, by doing it and by practicing it, you can get there. I'm about to slightly change directions, but before I do that, let me pause here and see, does anybody want to ask a question, comment, tell me I've got it all wrong, whatever? Nguyen.
So based on what you say, I understand that the general education is very important, because sometimes I complain about all the courses I take at my first year, because I see it's not related to my major. Yeah, not at all. But after listening to what you say, I think it provides us with the basic knowledge about everything. So when you go out there, you meet with other people, you know what they're talking about. So that actually benefit you in the long term. One thing I want to ask you is, can you name some of the transferable skills that can be used interchangeably between jobs? Because right now we so focus on the hard skill that sometimes we don't care much about the soft skill, and that's why we're been here with A Success to train ourselves. So can you name some of them?
Okay, so by the way, there's a huge research literature on this in developing countries, and I know you're probably thinking about the U.S. job market, but or maybe not, maybe the Vietnamese job market. But I think having a broad basic education is the right foundation. They find, in fact, one of the basic principles of liberal arts college and university education in the U.S. is that it's only partially about what you major in. It's really about developing the ability to think critically and to analyze. So you learn some stuff in high school, but then college is really about developing your ability to think. And then to begin to specialize. Now, I don't want to say that the hard skills are not important. They're important. And they're increasingly important in the job market in which I'm in, and which some of you are in, and which all of you will eventually be in. So you want to get those. You want to get those skills. But I think the ability to, what's really valued in almost any workplace, is the ability to take information, to analyze it, to synthesize it, and to make some judgments about it, and to make some well-informed judgments. I think being able to make a coherent argument or a coherent case about something is very important, no matter what field you're in. And then being able to write well, communication skills, But when I say soft skills, these are, I mean, those are sort of higher level soft skills. I've worked in environments where, I mean, with people with not much education, with not much earnings power. And so even very basic things like being able to show up to work on time every day, to be able to resolve conflicts with your coworkers and your supervisors, to tell the truth, you know, those sorts of things. Those are not soft skills that are necessarily taught in universities or even in high schools, but some of the basic, you know, kind of values and behaviors that you bring to work environment actually can be as important or more important. I'm of the belief that if you set your mind to it, you can ultimately learn the technical skills you need to learn to be successful in your job or in your career. I mean, what should a theater major really be able to know about calculus and the other sorts of things you need to be an economist? I mean,
A creative mind and abstract.
yeah, I mean, you know, some things, that's right. I get to sit up in front of a room and, you know, and act, but act like an economist. But, so, you know, so those things can be learned when you figure out what it is that you want to do. But I'm sure you can think of people who you've met either in professional or in school life, you know, who may be really smart, but who you think probably may not do too well in the workplace because they lack some basic social skills, or they, you know, or they lack some reliability, or some of these sorts of things. So I think, you know, there's basic analytical and communication skills, but then there's even this domain of soft skills of just, you know, being able to function at a high level in a workplace. And then the technical skills, when you figure out with, you know, this part, then you'll line up what you need to do. My friend who studied labor and industrial relations, she will be a fantastic doctor. She will get the skills that she needs to be a doctor, but you know, she has those other capabilities, and she's driven, and she'll do it.
I would just like to add one more model to your straight line, your zigzag line, and your spaghetti lunch. And I can stand up to do it. One of the things that I work with Korean university students who are here on an exchange. I run their exchange program. And one of the things that I tell them, based on my own experience, is pretty much this: that your future, no matter what your parents tell you, your schools teach you, and your society shows you, your future is rarely going to come at you like this. It's going to come from here or from here. And you need to be able to develop your sense of peripheral vision so that you can grab the opportunity as it comes to you. Otherwise, if you don't, it'll just go right past you to somebody else. So it ain't coming this way, it's coming this way. And which is another way. I don't know how you write peripheral vision, but we all need to develop our sense of what's happening, not just right in front of us, but all around us. I think that's the point.
Something like this. The good thing about this model, if I got it right, is that, you know, if you miss this one, you still could catch this one or this one. Or this one. And actually, it's true. If you're looking for opportunity, you'll find it. If you're just sort of the one risk about, again, I'm not saying anything wrong with this model, but one risk of this model is that you miss other things that might also be very exciting, maybe even more exciting as you go forward. Any other questions, comments before I change
Have you ever looked back and wonder what would have happened if you just stuck with theater?
I'd be waiting tables right now. I'm pretty sure, but no. I mean, that's a great question, but I think I feel very comfortable with the direction I took. I think, again, nothing against theater. For some people, you know, that's what they love and what they do well, right? but part of my philosophy, as actually personal philosophy, has been that what I was doing should feel right to me at the time that I'm doing it. Now I want to be careful about how I say that. I've always taken a very forward-looking stance, and at any given moment, I've been very happy with what I was doing. But it doesn't mean that at any given moment I say, "Oh, okay, forget all this. I'm just going to go and rip off my shoes and write poetry somewhere or something like that." Right? You get on you in your career life you make certain commitments. In your personal life you make certain commitments, and and so what you do once you've made a commitment, it's not sort of all blue sky, but but you can change paths. I was doing work at the World Bank on analysis and policy dialogue, and then now I'm working on projects. So you can make certain switches as you go forward.
At what point in your life did you recognize the importance of soft skills, and then once you realized, where did you find it?
So this is something that probably in my own way, I've taken some training courses during the course of my life that were very focused in their own way on soft skills, even though I didn't call it that in those days. But courses that have sort of helped with my awareness, with my of the environment around me, of communications with other people, of understanding what works well and not works and works less well in human interactions. I think those are all very important. We only as a discipline, meaning economists, started calling this thing soft skills several years ago, and I have to say that there may have been other disciplines that sort of understood this well. As economists, we were kind of dumb about this for a very long time, and we just thought about years of schooling as being some sort of indicator of success. And of course, years of schooling is important to success, but the quality of the education, there's sort of granularity or a sense of detail in what you study, and then of course these other areas that we didn't really take into account before.
Can I just add something about Andy's path, which is you hear a lot about the career, right, and the skills, but the soft skill was an parallel but independent path of communication. So he sought this out on his own. It's not something that the local college said you need to do this to gain these soft skills. So it's more of a human development kind of working on yourself. And it sounds kind of weird. I know for some people who think, well, that's the airy-fairy stuff that people do if they're interested in psychology only or something else. But no, that's kind of important life skills that you don't maybe get in school. You can pursue yourself. It could be through, I don't know, religion or other things, but it's more about your development as a person is just as important as the career path, I think, which allows him to be a better person at work, because that stuff that you learn on the side also brings in a better person at work, teamwork and all those other values. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I'll give you a very without mentioning any names, I'll give you a very specific example from the World Bank. There are some very smart people who work at the World Bank who nobody likes to work with because they're just difficult or they're unreliable. And then there are people who are maybe not quite as brilliant, still smart, still capable, but they arrive on time. When they say they're going to do things, they do it. People like working with them. They give other people credit in the workplace. They don't try and hoard all of the credit for themselves. And those people do much, much better and honestly make much more of a difference in their career because they're more generous of spirit, I guess is a way to say that. And that in itself is a kind of a soft skill. Any other questions or comments at this stage? how hard a time constraint do we have at noon?
We have 10 minutes left.
Okay, so we're going to do the quick version of this, but then I'll leave you some material so that if you're interested in learning more on this, you can learn more. So I said one of the things that the World Bank does and is actually famous for is for its analysis of economic and social situations and of policy. And every year we have something that we publish called the World Development Report. It's one of, especially if you're a college student, you've probably seen what, if not this particular one from a few years ago, then you may know the World Development Report. So this one is from 2012. It's on gender equality and development. It's one of the areas that I've worked on in the World Bank. It's really about promoting equality of opportunity for women as well as men. You probably know that in many parts of the world, even in very wealthy countries, even in the U.S., that women and men don't all have the same opportunities. And just to give you an example, even in the U.S., women on average earn between 70 and 80 cents for every dollar a man earns. So that's just one indicator. But if you go to other countries in other parts of the world, then the disparities between men and women in life and opportunities is quite different. So this is a global report. At that time, I was working in the East Asia and Pacific region of the World Bank, which includes Vietnam, China, Thailand, and then all the way through to the Pacific Islands. And so we did a companion report to that. I was the team leader and lead author for this report. But by the way, the cover is a photograph from Vietnam, which I like very much. But so, and Vietnam is one of the countries that's covered in this report. So, you know, my mom told me when you go visit somebody, you should always bring a gift. So I'm leaving this with you guys, as well as the overview. This is long, 250 some odd pages. This one, for those of you who want to get a more quick sense, still not that short, but it's about 25 pages. This gives you the whole story of the report. And this
electronic version?
There's an e-book. You can get that online on the World Bank website. And I was going to take a little bit of time to go through some of this. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to ask you when we finish the report, then we go out and we share it with audiences in the different countries. And I think what I'd like to do is to actually look at first at the YouTube video. That's a 2-minute summary in a very user-friendly way.
This is Chen.
And the Vietnamese.
She comes from Vietnam. At school, she never had the chance to focus on her skills. She got a job, but always earned less than men. She has never had an equal voice in her home or her community. For the first 14 years of her life, she was her father's daughter. Then she became her husband's wife. And now she is her children's mother. Jen has never been just Jen. Her life has never been hers. Kim's story is not unique. Many women in the East Asia and Pacific region are constrained by inequalities. But Jen has a dream. A dream that her daughter, Kim, will go to school where she will get a scholarship and career training. Kim will get a job with equal pay or will open her own business. She will make her own decisions. She will inherit her father's land. She will contribute positively to the development of her community. Kim will not only be someone's daughter, someone's wife, or someone's mother. Kim will be Kim. She will have equal opportunities. Her life will be hers. Gender equality in East Asia and the Pacific is about giving girls an opportunity and a voice with enough power to create a difference. Giving girls a voice through education, economic opportunities, and participation means empowering more people to fight poverty and to increase the well-being of developing countries. The East Asia and Pacific region of the World Bank is helping to build structures and establish norms to make Tian's dream a reality.
Who's got?
It's the Gender Action Project. So, not the clothing store. So this is a 2-minute glimpse into the work that was done in this report. I think in the interest of time, I will not go through the PowerPoint. Only to say that if you'd like to look at it, that we'll ask Nguyen to make paper copies.
You can't run through those slides really fast.
Well, what I can do, tell me is if I'm okay on time, I'll go through some of the big picture.
Okay, real fast. Because the substantive information.
Okay. Yeah, I told you at the beginning, economists like data, and we're trying to make a case for policy changes based on evidence. So basically, the report asks 4 questions, and so what is the state of gender equality in the region, meaning East Asian and Pacific countries? Why does gender equality matter for development? Why do gender inequalities persist? And then what can we do to promote equality between men and women in these countries? So I won't go into a lot of detail, but the report goes, pause it there for, actually, go back. Next one. Okay, so punchline 1 is if you look at East Asia and Pacific, and this what I'm about to say applies to Vietnam as well. Then we've seen significant economic and social progress. In Vietnam, it's been a very high-growing, a country that's been effective in reducing extreme poverty over the last 20 years, and including making progress on gender equality. So then there's some details which you can go to. Stop here. One interesting thing about East Asia and Pacific relative to many other regions of the world is that in many countries more girls than boys go to school. So this line here represents equality of boys and girls in school. Anything on this side means that boys have an advantage, more boys than girls go. Anything on this side means that more girls than boys go. So you can see that Vietnam is just one of these countries where slightly higher number of girls than boys go to school. Next one. Then other data on health outcomes. Next. Labor force participation. So here, this is actually, this is interesting. This U shape, I don't know if you all read graphs, but this is countries rising in per capita income, or income per person, and this is the share of people in the labor force. And this U shape is the average across the globe. So in other words, low-income countries have high participation. Basically, poor people can't afford not to work. When you get to, and this is women in particular, middle-income countries, women tend to work less, often because of social norms that say they should be out of the labor force. And then in higher-income countries, then women start to earn more, start to participate more in the labor force. Vietnam is right here. So women, very, very high share from a global perspective of women participate in the economy in Vietnam. Okay, next. So, but growth and development in the region have not been enough to eliminate gender inequality in all its dimensions. So, kind of a good news, bad news story. We see some economic and social advances, and yet challenges ahead. And then this is some data from Vietnam. it shows that even though on average more girls go to school than boys, that among certain ethnic minorities, I will not pronounce these correctly, I'm pretty sure, but Hmong, Dao, and Khmer, that we see that boys still have, the boys are the blue lines and the girls are the gold lines, that boys have a big advantage over girls when it comes to schooling. Next. If we look at land ownership, so land in Vietnam is still a very important economic asset. So the average land size for men is this big, and for women is this big. So men own more land than women, and when women own land, their parcels are smaller than men's. For every dollar a man earns, a woman in Vietnam earns 71 cents. And only, let's see, about 23% of parliamentarians in Vietnam are women. Actually better than the global average, but still we know nothing near equality in terms of political representation. I don't have data. Continue that that the access to economic opportunity through access to technology will also, there'll be a growing gap between men and women. So just to pause here for a moment, say we've tried to bring together data from a lot of different areas to document where there are areas of equality, where there are areas of inequality, where gaps have been closing over the years. Big cases for this in the report. I think first is that there's a basic issue of rights, human rights, and that so equality is between men and women is just should be a development objective in its own right. But second, and this one we find with the people that we work with at the World Bank is actually the more compelling one, for better or for worse, is that gender equality is also smart economics. That that more equality between men and women in societies leads to better outcomes in the labor market, higher productivity, better investments at the level of the family, and therefore productivity of the next generation, and better decisions in the public domain, in government and public policy. So some more data, because that's what we do at the World Bank. And then for each of these different domains, and then next. And then there's some evidence suggesting that as the world becomes more globalized, that the costs of inequality are going to be higher for societies. So this is an important issue now, but it's going to be an increasingly important issue in the future. Okay, we go into the report a little bit about what causes gender inequalities to persist, but we're not going to talk about that this time. And then the last slide I'll show here is just to say that on the basis of the evidence and the data that we put together, we then talk about the policy areas that can make a difference in promoting both more equality between men and women, but also better development outcomes in societies, including faster poverty reduction, faster income growth, and so on. And so we we identified, actually, stay here for a second. We identified 4 key strategic areas for public policy. So one is promoting gender equality in human development. Human development is really about education and health outcomes. So basically equality in what you need to learn and to have to be able to go out and to be a full, active, participating and contributing member of society. Closing gender gaps in economic opportunity. Once you've got the same levels of education and capability, then can you get the same pay for equal work? Can you have access to all areas of the economy? Can you have the same access as a woman than as a man in technology, or access to owning land and so on? Strengthening women's voice and influence. This is about political participation, but also participation in the social sphere. And then fostering new opportunities and managing emerging risks. This is, at this level, is very conceptual and vague, but it's really about, in the global economy, how do we make sure that women have the same access to technology as men, that they're protected if globalization has a specific impact, for better or for worse, on women and men because they occupy different parts of the economy. Can we make sure that that we foster the opportunities and protect both women as well as men against the risks, and so on. So underneath each of these are 4 more slides that go quite into detail, but I'll leave that to those of you who are interested to get a copy from Nguyen. And as I said, I will leave these with you. And I think the last thing I'll say on this, so this is a report. What we do when we generate this kind of report is then go and talk to people in government, talk to people in business, talk to people in civil society, so non-governmental organizations, to try to help change the policy environment and then public policies and investments that can make a difference in areas like this, gender equality, or in many other areas. So I think with that, I've run past my time, but I hope that you found this sort of interesting, both on the career path side and a little bit of advertising of what we do at the World Bank. I do personally have a few minutes, to continue the conversation if you have questions or comments or reactions. Otherwise, I turn it back to Nguyen.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your gifts as well as your presentation. And I hope after the seminar you will learn a lot about how to see and seize opportunity when it's coming to you. That's a very important lesson that you may want to take a deeper look at it. And thank you, Andy, for your presentation. And I think, do we have any more questions?
Sure we do.
Please.
I find the topic very interesting because I've been reading a lot about that lately. When you're generating the statistic of those graphs, do you consider like the different, for example, in China there are more birth rates of male than female. So did you like take it into account before you do that?
Absolutely. In my 10-minute version, I tried to give you the high-level picture, and then this overview gives a little more of the detail of the story. And this 250-page version has a lot. We actually have a section that deals specifically about the ratio of boys to girls in society. In China, we know that they have they've had for a long time a one-child policy, and that because of a preference for having sons over daughters, right? Then there are some terrible things that have happened that have meant that either before birth or after birth that girl babies have been killed. So we see this also, by the way, in Vietnam more recently, and it's quite a concerning issue. And we talk about that in the report, including some policy approaches to try to address what is quite a difficult issue. But yes, a lot of detail in this report on this, one of the more difficult issues, and then many other issues as well.
I have another question, which is for you. As a guy, you would like have all the advantages like on the economy and job and all that. Why would you care about women?
I think I care for two reasons. I think, and they're the first two reasons in the slide I showed before. I think one, it's just something that in its own right, it's important. I think that I value equality for its own sake, between men and women, between people of different nationalities and ethnicities. It's something that I personally believe that we should strive for, and I think it's a value that I believe other people should also want to strive for. But I've talked to many policymakers, and I think that even if you don't care about it for that reason, that you should care about it because because inequality affects development, affects economic growth, affects people's welfare in very big ways, and in some smaller ways. And so, even if you were a heartless person who didn't care about this at all because you thought it was a rights issue, you should care about it for utilitarian reasons. And so we make both of those cases. And personally, I think that the rights reason is a more important reason, but I think we should care about it for both reasons.
Well, thank you for your answer. The reason I asked because I kind of want the guys in this room to feel the importance of women. It's like he mentioned about rights, but think about it. One day you guys going to have girlfriends, wives, daughters, right? So I'm the only girl in my family, and I've been treated as, even though people like think of me as a man, but in most of the opportunities, I always sort of like a second person to be able to take the opportunity. Like all of the burdens is on me for the first so I kind of have the expectation of I have to work very hard to take care of the whole family. I also have to take care of a lot of housework at home, help my mom, help my cousins and all that. But in terms of opportunities, I'm always the second person who can get to it. Mm-hmm. I cannot go out. I have a tight curfew. So a lot of that. So I just want to let you guys know about that. And I'm from Vietnam. I grew up there. My family is a little bit liberal. Like they believe in equal rights, but it's not like it's always happened.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I would say just two things on that, from a male perspective, or from my personal male perspective. The first thing is that none of us as individuals get a choice of whether we're born male or female, right? We just show up. That. It was like the roll of the dice. We just got there, right? Mm-hmm. So, for me, I try to think. I could have as easily been born a woman. If the dice had fallen that way, how would I want my opportunities to be? And I think this is a useful way for guys to think about it, right? You just got here. You just showed up. You just got here accidentally. If you were a girl, if you had showed up as a girl, I mean, would you want to have different rights and opportunities than the ones that you have in your current form? I mean, everyone can answer that for themselves, but I think pretty much everyone's answer is likely to be no. I'd want to have the same rights. The second thing is that I think starting from the family and moving up to society, I think that we're all better off when we all enjoy the same rights and opportunities. I mean, Doris has a great job, and my kids and I benefit from the fact that she, brings home a good income. And it's, if we were in, I don't know, Saudi Arabia or Kuwait, it would be a very different thing. So, and then the fact that Doris was well educated and knew, along with me, how to, good parenting practices, then our children are better as a result. Our children are not our children are boys, but they're an asset to society, and also in a way, right? So so we've helped to form them in a way that's better than if it's just one of us had power and one of us didn't. So anyway, I can only think of good reasons, to promote equality. Of course, if you're a guy, it makes it a little difficult, when you want to impose your opinion on your girlfriend or spouse. But I think that's, you guys can work that out.
Okay, any more questions?
There's like maybe countries in the world where a percentage of women is happening.
Where the percentage of
women's time.
There are many countries. So we see some interesting patterns. If you look at Europe, much of Western Europe, and you look at the U.S. now, and a lot of East Asia, as you saw in one of the graphs that I showed. So young women now in many countries are getting more education than men, which is creating the foundation for more equal or even better opportunities in the economic sphere. And if you look over time, you see that women's economic empowerment or economic opportunities in those same countries has been increasing. But there's no country in the world, not even the ones that are most famous for gender equality, like Sweden and Norway, the Scandinavian countries, where you find that women make the same amount of money as men for the same job. So in that sense, we see a lot of progress in some areas, and women being out in the forefront in some areas, but not yet equality.
When you project it to be somewhat equal?
It depends on the domain. I think in education, in my lifetime, I'll see, except for maybe a small handful of countries, that women and men have equal opportunity in education. In the economy, I don't know. I'd like to see it in my lifetime, but we don't see it in the U.S., Sweden, or or Western Europe exactly. So, not sure. Big difference from when my mom grew up and when I grew up and when my kids are growing up. So, positive advances, absolutely no doubt. But equality as equality, I don't know. Fingers crossed.
But the pace has picked up.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, any more questions?
I mean, have you guys looked into segmenting like the different job markets and how they become more equal? Because some women make more money in a certain job market than others.
Yeah, that's true. There's a small minority of parts of the job market where women make more money than men, but I think that's still a minority of areas. Actually, let me show one graph here.
And then there would be like markets with that are consisting more of men than women, or their roles are larger.
Sorry, say that again. That last.
Like in some job markets, the roles of men would be larger than women. Like for example, if like a certain company needed to design a product for men specifically, and the perspectives are biased towards men.
Yeah.
Like that would be a big factor, and that would contribute towards that overall income average that you put up earlier.
Yeah.
For the ratio.
I think that's right. This is something that gets a little bit to the point that you're making, and we discussed it in the report also. So this is something we call gender streaming in education. What we see, this is true all around the world, but these data are for Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam. For about where at the tertiary, so the college level, that women and men specialize. And basically, if men and women were equally in a certain field, it would be, the lines would be right at 50. But what you see is that, at least in East Asia, that, but it's true actually in most countries, that women specialize in studying in education and then becoming teachers, that they go into healthcare, but more as nurses actually than doctors. And then it turns out that in Thailand at least, and a little bit in Vietnam and Indonesia, that women specialize in business administration, but not upper level, but not like MBA type activities. And so this is college education, but then this then in turn affects people's opportunities in the labor market and what they earn. So people who study education then go on to be teachers. As I said, they study healthcare and they go on to become nurses and so on. Whereas if you look at law, engineering, strongly male-dominated subjects in these countries. And then, law is a very lucrative career, engineering a very lucrative career. So we see segmentation starting even, not necessarily in the level of education, which is what I was talking about earlier, but in the direction that people go in education, which then feeds into people's economic opportunities.
So yeah, thank you, Andy. I think it's time for us to wrap up because we have office activities to go on. So thank you. If you want to ask more questions, we'll be staying here for a little while so that we can continue. And thank you for your gifts. It's very...
My mother would be happy.
Okay, so before we leave, can we go up here and take a group picture with Andy? Everyone? Clear away the chairs a little bit. How about hands up?